Thank you. I didn't hear what Guy said, so I'm presuming it was good. I'll just say.
So let's start straight with some questions. At the start of your career, so immediately upon graduating from Sarah Lawrence College, you were hired as an editor at Vogue magazine, as I said, the youngest editor at that magazine. In such a competitive industry, what do you think made you stand out, and how were the first few years of your career?
I'm going to be really honest, I think it was luck. I'd like to say I was deserving or that I was something extraordinary. That would not be true. I was very influenced by fashion when I went to the Sorbonne my junior year in college. And I fell in love with fashion, and I happened to meet some amazing young women that worked for French Vogue. So I didn't really know what an editor was or did. I had absolutely no idea. And I know that when I got back to New York, I really wanted to be a designer. And my father paid for so much tuition to get me through undergraduate that he said, I'm just not going to do that anymore. If you think you really want to be in fashion, go get a job. And I ended up working as a sales girl at Yves Saint Laurent. And I was sort of discovered by this woman named Frances Pataky Stein, who was quite historic in fashion, American fashion, because she not only was fashion director of American Vogue, she also went on to be creative director of Calvin Klein. And then after that, she had a storied career at Chanel in Paris, and she created all the accessories for almost 30 years alongside Carl. And so she was sort of the person that discovered me. And when I sold her a pair of pants or a blazer, I don't quite remember, by Yves Saint Laurent, she said, when you get out of college, give me a call and I will hire you at Vogue. And I told my mother, and I just said to a room earlier that I said to my mother, I'm really excited, I'm going to get a job at Vogue. And she said, no, you're not. No one's going to hire you. And I said, no, I think I am. And she said, no, you're not. But so when I got out of college, I called her. Actually, she really did remember me, and I really got the job. But the truth is, I really wanted to go to design school, and my father would not pay for any more education. It was more about working, and I think that's something I say to a lot of young people who want to be in fashion, that you should work for somebody you respect. And if you can't get that, then you should just work for someone in fashion, if you really want to. And then you'll know whether you really want to be in fashion or not. Because you may think you want to be, but until you really work, you don't know. And also, it really is great to be paid to learn. It's a wonderful thing to learn, and somebody actually hands you a paycheck. And I think that's one of the great things, the great piece of advice I can give to any young person who wants to be in any industry, is get paid to learn. So in my case, I ended up at Vogue, and it was grueling. I don't know if any of you have seen The Devil Wears Prada, or you're too young to remember that film. You probably are too young to remember that, but in any event, it was a very sort of light version of life at Vogue. It was like Vogue light. Vogue is a place that bears, like here, so much history. I think that anyone who is educated about fashion would have been educated partially by Vogue magazine and by Condé Nast for the last 100 years. So being there enabled me to really have an education that you could not get anywhere else. The level of photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, designers, clothing. There's nothing in the world not accessible to you when you work at Vogue. It can be anywhere in the world, and I'll be in our office within, I say hour, in the office of Vogue, you know, almost overnight, even when I was there. And so when you're exposed to that level of talent and you learn from that, it's an enormous, enormous privilege. But it is grueling. It involves a lot of sacrifice. There are no hours, and particularly in the part I was in, which is editorial. And, you know, but I was just so happy to be there. I mean, it was like, every day was like breathing more air, and it was something that enabled me to move on with the rest of my life. So those years were grueling. I can't say they weren't. Long days, long nights, everything. But totally worth it to me, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So following up from that, you mentioned the importance of working for someone you respect, but also Devils Wear Prada. So I'm intrigued to know, what was your relationship with your first boss, fashion editor?
It wasn't Anna Wintour, my first boss, because we are contemporaries. I worked for a woman, well, first of all, the woman that hired me, Frances Stein, but then I also worked for the editor-in-chief, Grace Marbella, as well in her office. I was one of her 3 assistants. And then I worked for Polly Mellon, the legendary Polly Mellon. And Polly Mellon used to inspire fear and loathing from everyone in the entire floor at Vogue. I mean, she'd come in off the elevator and everybody started to just tremble like this, and you could feel Polly approaching, and she'd start screaming, "Vera!" like that, you know, I'd just start to shake. But she really taught me everything about organization, about logic, about being overly prepared. You were never prepared enough for a shoot. And her passion. Polly would be at the French collections and be the only one to stand up and start clapping, screaming, "Bravo, John," you know, for John Galliano or whoever. She was a passionate woman. And she imbued me and many of her other assistants with that same passion, education. But she was tough, very, very tough. In fact, in one of the Vogue movies, I think it's The Editor's Eye, they asked me what Polly was like, and I said, brutal. I said something like maybe a bitch or brutal or something like that. I don't remember. I said something very inappropriate, but it was the truth because that was the only way that she felt she could train me. It was like tough love. And in a way, I still thank her for that, because I could never probably have gone on with the same work ethic without experiencing her training, so.
Absolutely. So after 17 years at Vogue.
Yeah, 17.
What made you decide to go to Ralph Lauren, and what was your experience like?
I still wanted to be a designer. After all that, I still thought, God, I can do this. I'd go to all the shows in Milan and Paris. I'd shoot all the clothes for years and years. And something in me just still wanted to do that. And I was lucky enough, actually I was supposed to go to work for Jeffrey Beam, another man that I idolized. And right before I was supposed to start with him, I got a job offer from Ralph Lauren. And that was interesting because the interview was really fascinating. I'd only worked at Vogue all those years. I didn't know anything else. And I met with him, and the first thing he asked me was, "What do you hate about my clothes?" Which was, you know, really intimidating. And I said something that went like this: "Do you want me to be honest with you, what I really think, or do you want me to say something that you want to hear?" And he said, "I want you to tell me what you really think about my clothes." I won't say that here in the room, but he hired me right then and there. And he said, "Come back, you're hired." And it was an incredible experience, just like Vogue. I've only really worked for two jobs before my own company. One was Vogue and one was Ralph Lauren. And when you work for Ralph, you learn about someone who is so consistent in his point of view and so confident about who he is. And not only that, somebody who understands branding. I don't think he would even call it branding. I don't think he's even aware of that. I think what it is his vision of who he is and his integrity. And I think that's something that you don't often see in fashion companies, because fashion by its very definition implies change. Constant change, constant reinvention. Nothing's ever good because you've seen it for 10 seconds. And Ralph was never subject to that. He always felt that, you know, he had such a strong vision, and his vision was not only of fashion, but of America. And he brought that to fashion. He brought American fashion and American style to the world of fashion. And so I felt very lucky again to have gone to the Ralph Lauren School of Fashion after the Vogue School of Fashion. But in both cases, they were extraordinary experiences, and I, to this day, will never forget it. I mean, I feel so lucky, and I really owe both companies, if I'm sitting here, I owe them both my entire career.
Absolutely. So it was actually your own wedding that inspired you to launch your bridal wear?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the design for your own wedding dress and what made
Well, I got engaged very late. And for years, my mother's friends would say, "Why isn't she married? What's wrong with her?" And my mother would say, "I've given up, and she's never getting married, and that's it." And so when I started to look for a wedding dress, when I got engaged, I was working at Ralph Lauren, and I was a design director there. And Ralph and I sort of agreed that it would be bad if he did the dress, because if I didn't like it, I'd lose my job. And if I, you know, I wanted him to make changes, he might get angry at me. So we decided early on that maybe I should just work on my dress on my own. And I realized when I was shopping for a wedding gown that there was nothing very modern. Wedding dresses at that point, it's sort of become this commodity. And this was an era when, you know, Cher wore headpieces and things were hanging down off her face. And, you know, most of the dresses were 4-inch cap sleeves with a big Dupioni skirt and sort of sequin lace. And I'd been at Vogue and seen everything in fashion in the entire world for almost 2 decades. And then I'd worked for Ralph Lauren, so there was nothing that I really found that appealed to me. And it was my father who identified this business opportunity. And he said, there have to be other women like you out there who don't just want a formulaic dress, and they really want something that's more special, or, you know, more inventive, or maybe realizing the different types of women, the diversity of women. I mean, a woman can be very modern or very traditional or very sexy in the sense of, you know, more show-offish. I mean, there's so many different kinds of women, and bridal fashion never reflected that. It reflected the image of a bride, but not of women. And so, coming from the fashion background I did, I'm not really a bridal designer per se. I'm really a fashion designer who happens to also do bridal. And that's a very, very important, really, really important detail, because I never have seen bridal gowns as purely formulaic. I've always seen them as fashion. And that has led me to try a lot of different things and sort of shock people. But I think it was important. I think, like everything else, bridal had to be viewed in a different light. And so when I got engaged, that's what really set it all off. And also, I didn't see anything for someone who was 40. 40 was like 90. So, you know, I was looking around and all the other brides were like 22. And here I am looking at these wedding gowns, and I really couldn't relate to any of them. And then I said, well, maybe I'll go to Paris and go to Chanel and get something there. But that was hard to do working for Ralph as a design director, so I never made that trip to Paris. But I have to say, I've never considered bridal as something that's purely, you know, either pomp and circumstance or a beach dress. I think all of it is possible today, and it depends on the bride. And I think she should feel free and be given permission to express herself the way she wants to be. And that's what I try to bring to every collection that I do.
Absolutely. So let's talk about personality now. So in an industry that is, quote, often mocked for its population of self-serious introverts, end quote, many describe you as having the opposite personality, someone very spontaneous, eccentric, and charming. What role do you think...
Eccentric. Is that a good word?
What role do you think personality has to play in fashion?
I think it's probably become more important than it once was. I think a lot of designers, we used to joke, work in the ivory tower, and a very famous designer named Giorgio Armani once said that that design is a temple, it's the temple of design. To come into a design meeting with Armani is coming almost having a religious experience. And that's really the way I believe he still views design. And I know that today that's harder. We are in a different era now, and you need to have so much exposure, and the pressures of all the design lines, I sort of referred to that upstairs before, is very difficult. I've counted it out that it's basically 12 weeks from collection to collection. And that isn't including men's, because we don't do full menswear. So it could be even 6 weeks. And all you're given is this piece of fabric. And what do you do with this roll of fabric? How do you take it to a place that's cohesive, that's organized, that's creative, that's inventive, that's producible? I mean, all of these things are part of the design process. And I think very few people realize that. And it's now the speed. So in a world where it's so fast, I think personalities become more important because they help a brand and they help the product to stand out, as well as ambassadors for brands. I mean, that's always been there, but not to the extent that it is now.
What do you think is your mission as an artist?
For me, it's always to push myself to explore further, more techniques, more ideas. To really, every collection I do, I really give everything I have. It's at times excruciating. There was a time when I knew what I was going to do for a collection, and I would do research. We used to have time to do research, buy books. If I was thinking of an artist, I would study that artist, like Vermeer, the girl with the pearl earring. I won a CFDA, Women's Wear Designer of the Year for that collection. But that time no longer exists. We have to move much faster now. And that's troubling to me. That's one of the things that I think, Tom Ford said the same thing, that there's no more time. But I know that for me, with everything I do, I really try to do a thorough examination of what I'm trying to achieve within a collection and to make it as cohesive. And you don't have a lot of time either. So you have to be able to express that, whether it's in a video of 30 seconds or a show of 7 minutes. That's all the time you have to express your vision. And that's a lot of pressure on all of us, not just me, but I think I speak for, my fellow designers as well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned creativity and innovation as key things. What do you think is the key to your success and your brand success?
My success? God, I never feel successful, ever. I don't ever I feel accomplished, I feel educated, I feel experienced. Successful, probably not that much, because there are many ways to measure success in fashion. Is it financial? Are you the biggest player in the world in fashion? Or are you the most respected? Or are you the most creative and free? Or are you the most consistent? I mean, these are all things that play through every designer's brain. All this noise is in your head every time you design a skirt. And I think that any designer that is a serious designer would say the same thing. And so success. I would say probably it's my passion and my dedication and my love of fashion, and also my experience, my education. I am a student. I like to study, and I respect my fellow designers, and many of them, I stand in awe of them. And that's a wonderful way to feel, even after all these years. It'll be 50 years for me next year that I've been in fashion, and it'll be 30 years next year that I've had my own company. And I still feel the same way about other designers, about their talent, their creativity, and their work ethic. And it's a very, very hard business, and you have to love it. You shouldn't be in it if you don't love it. You shouldn't be in any business if you don't love it. By the same token, the better you get at it, the more you begin to love it. And that could be whether you're a banker or you're a lawyer or, you know, you're in Silicon Valley. I mean, I think as you grow, as you become more assured, as you learn more, you begin to really love anything you do more as well. So it works both ways. But for me, success, I wouldn't know how to really define it. I mean, a lot of people define success by fame. And I've seen fame be so fleeting that I can't really say that that defines success for me on a personal level. I think a work ethic, integrity, humility, and the constant search to do it better, to not feel satisfied, and to realize that you can always come up with something newer or something that's more evolved. And that's how I've lived my whole career in fashion. It's been the love of my life. It's also been excruciating, like many love affairs, but it's something, it's an industry I'm very proud to be a part of. I have to say, that's something I do feel. I feel proud to be a member of the fashion industry.
As a follow-up question, who do you look up to in the fashion industry?
Oh God, there's so many. I mean, there are people who, the sheer size and magnitude of their business and their power in the marketplace is a kind of success. Even though many of the designers do not own the brands they're hired to work for. I think creativity with a kind of freedom that's without limits is another kind of respect I have. I mean, I could cite Gucci's present success right now for the enormity of it. And I could cite Rei Kawakabe for Comme des Garçons as somebody who's been fearless her whole life and a genius. I mean, she's somebody who never stops being inspired, and particularly at this stage of her life, she has nothing to prove to anyone, and yet I believe she has a lot to prove to herself constantly. So there's so many that I really, really admire. I admire Ralph Lauren because he brought America, the style of Americans. I mean, Europe you look to for grandeur and history and provenance, but Americans you look to for ease and lifestyle. And both Ralph and Calvin Klein, each in their own ways, brought that to fashion. And so there's so many. I mean, I couldn't even begin to say how many. You know, I love Rick Owen. He's a dear friend. I'm wearing his T-shirt. He's really somebody that has explored the most dark side of fashion, I think, with incredible courage and conviction. And he's technically so able. And so there are many. John Galliano, I mean, also his freedom. John's a free spirit and technically an incredible designer technically. So it's hard for me to just say who I admire the most. Miuccia Prada, I mean, Jill Sander, there have been so many. But I think what I admire too is their humility and their work ethic and their passion for what they do. And that's something you have to respect.
Absolutely. So the list of public figures that have worn Vera Wang range from, you know, Chelsea Clinton to Ariana Grande. What role do you think the celebrity factor has?
Actually, what? Celebrity. celebrity has defined my business in particular, because from the very first, for some reason I don't really understand, my very first bride when I opened my store on Madison Avenue, New York, was a Kennedy. So, and that is our American royalty. So I have to say it sort of found me in an odd way. In that era, celebrity dressing did not exist. So if you either had a socialite that wore your clothes, a little bit like Phantom Thread, the film, that was the celebrity of that era. And they were the ones, the so-called socialites, that could afford the clothing. Celebrity culture was not what it is today, nothing to do with it. And the education these women had that went to Paris and went to all these houses and like Worth and all these things forever. I mean, all these incredible fashion houses, Madame Grey, all of these, before even Yves Saint Laurent, Dior himself, Balenciaga. Every one of these houses existed for women that were extremely wealthy. It was not a democratic business. And I think with celebrity fashion today and their influence, it has helped to democratize fashion a great deal. And our company in particular, as an American house, was very lucky from the very beginning. We always seemed to attract celebrities.
What advice would you give to those in the audience that want to go into the fashion industry, and more specifically young women who want to become fashion designers?
Young women in particular, not young men?
Oh, as well.
Okay, young women, okay. It's a touchy subject right now for us, so I have to say that I did say that, once again I'll reiterate, that work for someone. I see so many people that, you know, their parents help them and they think they can start a fashion company, and, you know, and in the end they don't make it, because fashion is big business today, and you need incredible financing, you need incredible infrastructure, and these are things you just don't get just by starting off. So when you work for someone that you respect, or a house whose vision you love, you learn about you see all these things going on. And that's an education you cannot duplicate. And very few people start on their own and succeed. They're very, very few. It's even more impossible today than when I started. And I think, I'm gonna say it one more time, work for somebody you really respect. And if you can't get that particular job, you know, try for another. But to be paid to learn is the biggest privilege, because you're learning and you're getting paid. And that's the best way to understand any industry and to really know if you really want to be a part of it or not.
Absolutely. Could you talk us through a little bit through the creative process of how you get an idea and then put it into pen and paper?
Oh, God.
And if you do anything in particular to spark your creativity?
I sit in my bed at night and cry. No, I mean, literally, I say, oh my God, the show's in like 7 weeks, I haven't got one idea. I mean, when I started, I used to have time to research. I'd say, oh, you know, I'm gonna do Flemish painters, or oh, I'm gonna do Deadwood, this Western TV show on TV. And I mean, that was crazy. And, you know, now there are times I'm just making clothes and I say, where are we going with this? Because I wasn't able to come up with it. And so during that period where we're trying to create a collection of 6 weeks, max, I have to find some way to bring all the components together. And that's not an ideal way to work. It's nerve-wracking, it's frightening, it's excruciating. And sometimes you don't have the right fabric, and it's too late to get it from Italy. And you know, it's a real process, I have to say, particularly at the collection level. It's not about items, it's about a vision. And you know, sometimes I think I must be a serious masochist to put myself through this for 30 years. But it It has, let's say, it has given me confidence when I'm really feeling frightened or scared or frustrated or empty creatively. I say to myself, you've been here before. You have done this before. You can do this. You will get through this. And I sort of just keep telling myself that, although there are a lot of really close calls. I mean, sometimes it's like 2 days before a show and I'm switching gears. You know, Marc Jacobs once said that to me. He said, I liked it on Tuesday, but I didn't like it on Thursday, and by Friday I thought I was on the wrong path. I said, God, me too. You know, and the two of us are sort of saying, commiserating together. But it is true that, you know, everything you look at every day before a collection, some days you like it, and sometimes you say to yourself, what was I thinking? I mean, it's that precarious. And I think most designers would, if they were really being honest, would agree.
Absolutely. So my final question before we open up to questions from the audience. How do you keep Vera Wang season after season at the forefront of the fashion industry?
I think I can't say that we're at the forefront of the fashion industry. I think that I try very hard to take chances. I believe that if you're going to work at the collection level, you're there to take chances. You're there to try things, to experiment. I think that's what you do when you're working at the highest price point. And so for me, that involves trying to make things, bonding fabrics. Lately I've been bonding, and I needed a bonding machine. And you know, you just try to, you know, put fabrics together to invent new textures or a new way they would react to the shoulder or the back or the, I mean, it's getting more and more technological fashion. And people have asked me, what is the future of fashion? And I always say there'll be new materials. There will be materials that a sewing machine cannot sew. And you're going to have to heat set it or bond it. And that's what's going to change fashion. And it already is. The traditional ways of simply sewing by hand or with a machine cannot always solve the problems that you face when you're trying to work with fabrics. You cannot penetrate them with a needle. You have to find another way of dealing with it, and like techno fabrics, I call them. And so it's challenging. That will be the future. That is the present, and it will only get more and more technical as time goes on.
Thank you. So now we'll take a few questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone to reach you, and please stand up and stick to one question per person. So for the first question, we'll go to the lady in the second row, in the black shirt.
Thank you, Vera. So my name is Chen-Shi Wang, also last name Wang. So I'm currently an Oxford MBA student, and after graduation, I would like to start my entrepreneurship in arts and culture, which is also related to fashion.
After your MBA?
Yes, which is coming soon in this September.
Yes.
Thank you. So my question is actually broad, but also profound. It's a question about fashion. For me, fashion is more like a ghost. Everybody knows it exists, but no one really sees clearly what this ghost looks like. So fundamentally, how would you like to define fashion? What distinguishes a great fashion designer to an ordinary one? Thank you.
Easy question. Yikes. I would say the great designers have a vision. They have a vision of a woman or man, and that vision is something that is unique. It's not what everybody else wears. That's too easy. That's being a shopper, not a designer. A designer has to be someone who sees things in other proportions, other contexts, in a whole different way, with a different attitude. And then if they're really influential, it comes down the fashion chute. It goes to the next level, then the next level, then the next level. I think because of how big fashion has become as an industry, that sometimes a lot of that is lost now. But the experimentation and the things that really define a great designer and that kind of intellectual exercise is something that is probably not that rare, but not that encouraged anymore in our industry, because people are looking for fast fashion. They want things that are on trend so that everybody looks the same or versions of the same. If it's a wide leg pant, which I'm wearing today, right now, or whatever, if it's a lingerie inspired top, these are just trends. These are not the vision of a visionary designer. I'm sorry to say, it's a big difference. And I think there are still designers today that are determined to have a vision and to create that way. But because of the nature of the business, it's based on how much you can sell. So if it's a wide pant, then there are going to be 80 million versions of that all over the world, from Moscow Fashion Week to Hong Kong Fashion Week to New York Fashion Week to Milan or Paris. It's a really, really innovative designer, is somebody that really sees clothing and proportion and fabric in a whole new way. And that takes study.
Thank you. So next question, we'll go to my right.
Thank you so much for being here today, Vera. I apologize about my voice. So I recently graduated from Sarah Lawrence College. I'm sorry to say I missed your keynote speak a few years back, but I wanted to ask for any other Sarah Lawrence people that are in the room, because some of us are here. Do you think there's any aspect of your experience there or on your year abroad?
Sarah Lawrence?
Yeah, that influenced other student career. I'm
kind of like a maverick. So Sarah Lawrence was the only college I think I could graduate from. I mean, you know, sorry to say, these hallowed halls, but my father's dream was that I go to Harvard. And I didn't even apply because I didn't think I could get in. But Sarah Lawrence was really, in hindsight, the right school for me, because it encouraged individuality in a way that was quite avant-garde in that era. I mean, just the course load and the choice of, you know, what you're studying was unheard of. There was a thing called, well, still is, the Dawn method, in which you're assigned a Dawn, who's almost like your psychiatrist or your parent, and not just your teacher. And there's something special about that, because that person encourages you to discover yourself, to be individual, and not to blend in with a class in a certain way. And that was probably the only college I could have ever made it through, because I didn't conform terribly well, ever. And I think that that's why that school was really the right school for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next question, we will go to the hand all the way in the back.
Hi, I've recently just finished my final major project on fuller bust women. And I was wondering that when you design your clothing...
I'm sorry, what did you just, about what women?
Oh, sorry, I've just finished my final major project on fuller bust women and how the fashion industry doesn't always include them. And I was just wondering, when you design your clothing, do you ever think about women with a fuller bust, or is there just not the market for it?
That's a really fair question, actually, because we have dealt with that in the industry for a very long time. I'm a board member of the Council of Fashion Designers of America. I'm also an officer. And it's not even about necessarily the body shape or the weight or that kind of whatever you would call, not rules, but ideas about how fashion should look. What it really has happened to us is that fashion in many ways has become democratized, but at the same time it's become very trend-based, so that when you see a period of fashion, say in the 70s when I started in fashion, it was a very, very different kind of body type. The models at that time were very different. They weren't particularly fit. They weren't particularly athletic. It was just a very, very different, like anything else in fashion, it changed. And the very fact today that we are able to embody all different kinds of women is part of that democratization, not only in terms of price and availability of clothing, but also embracing all kinds of women that can then enjoy and create their own identity with their fashion choices. And so that's something that we do discuss all the time in our industry. And it's been, you know, like anything else, an evolution. And we're all working towards seeing things through so many different eyes in so many different ways and trying to explore that, I think each and every one of us in fashion. I hope that answered a little bit what you were asking.
Thank you. So now, next question, we'll go to the second row. Just here.
Hello, my name is Alexandra. I'm graduating from MSc Social Science of the Internet this summer. Thank you for an amazingly interesting talk. It was especially interesting to hear how you were noticed and how you get your first job at Vogue, and how you were speaking about learning from the best. So my question is related and a bit bold. How do I get hired by you?
Ah, that's so flattering. It's totally possible. I mean, I say that honestly because we've always really loved having interns come and work for us. And actually, I've had some also bad experiences for the interns, not for us. But, you know, one of my parents' very, very good friends, their daughter wanted to be in fashion. And she came to intern for me for a summer. And by the end of the summer, I said, how'd you enjoy it? She said, I hated it. And I don't want to be in fashion anymore. I'm going to medical school. So I said, was it us or was it you? You know, that kind of thing. And it's a true story, by the way. She couldn't stand fashion after working for me. Not even with me. I didn't, you know, I mean, working in the company and working in the industry. So, no, I mean, I think we're always looking for people that really are passionate, that have ideas, that see fashion in a new way, not ways we've seen. And, you know, we're always on the lookout to hire, you know, interns for starters, and then eventually they graduate into jobs.
Thank you. Next question. We will go to the hand in the second row, the one closest to me. Yeah.
Hi, Vera. Thank you very much for the talk. So I'm currently studying law, but prior to that, I wanted to study fashion. But one of the things that, in a sense, put me off, and I think you sort of touched on that, is the relative uncertainty and how people could go to the best fashion schools, Central St. Martin's, Parsons, and still find it hard to move from fashion school to a job. And you talked about being paid to learn, but one thing that I think happens a lot in the fashion industry is unpaid internships. So I guess my question is, what's your advice to someone who is leaving fashion school and is trying to get a job, but not sort of enter the cycle of unpaid internships and actually have some certainty on their career track?
Do you mean certainty in the fashion industry, or do you mean certainty in your job?
No, I mean more
like... those are not necessarily the same thing.
Yes, no, I mean more of people that are trying to get a job, but not to have to go through several unpaid internships.
And not go through internships.
Well, go through internships, but I mean basically the idea that people don't really get hired sometimes, but they end up in a cycle of internships and it's hard for them to become employed.
Actually, I didn't even realize that. Because obviously not every intern gets hired by the place they intern with or the company they intern with. They may intern with, you could intern with Ralph Lauren and end up at Balenciaga, you know, in Paris. So I think it's, I think the uncertainty of fashion is no different than the uncertainty of any other industry. I think where it is a bit tougher is that you are measured in ways that are not finite. So, you know, if you do analyses for a bank and you're analyzing companies for a hedge fund or anything, you will be judged on whether they're profitable or not. If they don't make money within 3 years and get divested of that company, then they failed. Fashion is not that. Fashion is much more ethereal, it's much more complex, it's nuanced. It's hard to measure success in fashion. As I said before, there's so many kinds of success. You can be a retailer and be very successful. So I think if you are feeling that you want to enter the fashion world, but you're already a bit discouraged because you've had many internships and you haven't found maybe a future job for yourself, I would say definitely not to give up. It's like being an actor in England or Hollywood or wherever. I mean, many people wait on tables forever just to wait for their break. I don't say that to be pejorative, I say that because it's the truth. And I think that if you really love fashion and feel that strongly about it, you will find a way to be in fashion. And that I'm sure of.
Thank you. Next question. We will go to the person just next to, yep.
Thank you. So first of all, I thank you so much for giving the talk tonight. And my name is Fu Jiazhu, and I'm studying chemistry here. I think I'm from the same hometown as you in China.
Same
province. Jiangsu, I think.
I have two parents that I had two parents, and they were from different my father was from Shanghai, and my mother was from Jiangxi province.
Like Shanghai is quite close to my hometown.
On the Yangtze River. So, yes.
So my question is what's the biggest difference you find from between working for a company
yes.
and running your own brand, or what's the most difficult thing you first find between transferring between these two positions?
Right, because I've done both. I would say that if you need a paycheck, it's kind of nice to work for someone else because you know that paycheck is coming, hopefully, and that part of your life is taken care of. Whereas being an entrepreneur, you never know what's going to happen. You have absolutely no concept about things you can't even control or even dream of that can happen to you. So it's a very different kind of headset and a very different kind of personality. Not everyone can deal with being a true entrepreneur. I'm not saying it's better, it's just different. And you have to be aware that it's constant worry. It's constantly trying to figure out how to stay alive and how to keep the company going and how to keep your employees going, how to keep them motivated, how to offer them some sort of future. And when you work for someone else, that is taken care of for you. They worry about that. You worry about what you're doing there and that you're doing the best you can possibly do. Because if you don't want that job, there are millions of other people that do. And you have to remember that constantly in your head that if you have a job and you're learning and you're thriving, then that is an extraordinary experience. And you will never forget it, and you will take it with you the rest of your life wherever you go and whatever you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question. We will go to the second row to the left. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've been to both Milan and Paris. So I was wondering if you could tell me what the difference is between them in the fashion sense, but also which one you prefer, bearing in mind that I'm from Milan.
Okay, so I think Milan has always been known for leather goods. And I mean that in a very serious sense. Nobody works with leather better than the Italians. There's absolutely no one on earth. I think it started with the Roman sandals before Julius Caesar. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can weigh in on this because you're more educated than I am. But I have to say that no one works in leather better than the Italians. It is your heritage. It really is. And so many of the great fashion houses out of Milan have started because of leather goods. I'll cite Gucci for one just to begin with. Prada is another. They're all not do not brand them as accessory businesses. That would not be fair. They really understand the craft of leather and things that are more related to sportswear and maybe an easier kind of look. Paris has started as fully couture. From Louis XIV, I've been reading about him a lot recently, and Paris is about construction of dresses. It's about the kind of clothing that is almost, how should I say, it's fast becoming, well, let's just say you can't find that kind of craftsmanship very much anymore in clothing. And that's a pity, because it's a dying art form, because young people today don't want to learn how to sew like that. They used to go like their grandmother and great-grandmother, and they'd go to an atelier like Dior. So they'd work for generations at Dior. But they no longer want to do it. They say, well, I don't want to do that. You know, I want to be either a star or a designer or something like that. They're losing interest in the craftsmanship of what is known as French fashion. And so both are valid in different ways. But I think Milan has always been known for that kind of lifestyle brand, and the way people dress, have always dressed there. And Paris is actually quite formal for so many decades, even in my lifetime. I remember that one of the first designers to maybe bring sportswear to the French was Yves Saint Laurent. He dressed women in men's clothes, in pants, in blazers, in things that women never wore before. And so they're their history is very, very different. Paris used to be a dressmaking town. It was about dresses, and for men, certainly about tailoring. And Milan, of course, is tailoring for men as well, but very much the craftsmanship of leather goods and leather clothing. And that's something that Milan has always been known for and will always be known for. Both are equally competitive, they always have been, and London now as well. And I think that with the international world we live in fashion now, it's much more fluid. I mean, I think American designers have worked out of Paris, Italian designers have worked out of New York, British designers have worked in Paris. So I think it's a very different time now in fashion. But those two things do hold true. I mean, each country had its own history of what they were good at. And that history follows with every generation.
Thank you. So now to the next question. We will go to the hand all the way to the right.
Hi, and thank you very much for your talk. I was just really interested because you were talking about the ways in which your clothes and fashion more generally can be used by people to create an identity for themselves and express themselves in certain ways. Well, my friend and I are drag performers, as you might see, and one thing that we're quite interested in and gets talked about in drag circles a lot is creating fantasy and feeling fantasy and living it. And I was just wondering the extent to which you see your work and the work of fashion as being creating fantasy or creating the tools for people to create their own fantasies, or is it different things at different times?
I think in one part of my business, which is bridal, people tend to think of bridal as fantasy. And for me, it isn't really that. I know that's odd coming from me, but I think of bridal as every bit about fashion as ready to wear. To me, it's just a different format, a different proportion, different fabrics, and definitely the usage is different. Usually a bridal gown is worn only once. They're no longer passed down, I don't think that often anymore. And it's once again about the woman. It's very much about the bride for me. When I think of a bridal collection, I'm thinking of how she will look on her wedding day. When I think of ready to wear, I'm thinking myself. as a creator. I'm thinking, what would I want to wear? How would I wear it? People used to ask me, do you wear your own clothes all the time? I said, when I first started with bridal, I said, well, I don't run around in a wedding dress every day. So obviously, you know, I don't wear my own clothes, I'm only doing bridal. But since I've been doing ready-to-wear, certainly what I feel and what I want to wear is what I try to create with every collection. So they're very, very bifurcated. One is in that direction, the other is in that direction. But yet the one thing that is true is that whatever I do, I try to keep the consistency of my study, my vision, and how I really, or what I believe women deserve, the quality that women deserve. That clothing is expensive, all clothing is expensive, whatever price point you're spending. And I think women deserve the best of me. And I try to give the best, whether I'm doing a $19 t-shirt or I'm doing a $20,000 dress. For me, the process is still the same. I try to do the best I possibly can. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but please join me in thanking Vera Wang for joining us today.